Kaveh, thank you for taking the time to speak with us about this beautiful film.
My pleasure.
So this is your first feature-length fictional feature film, correct?
It is.
And you're also the writer of the film. So I wondered if maybe you could start off by telling us, where the idea came from and how it evolved from idea to script to film.
Yeah. Well, I wrote it with Pablo Herrera. He, because of credits and complicated stuff, we couldn't be credited as co-writers, but we wrote it together. So I wanted to make sure to mention that. But yeah, I mean, I was in Cuba. I was working on another script that never got finished, and I was just really fascinated by the relationship between Cubans and foreigners, and in particular the sex tourism trade that goes on there, and the way that, especially right after the Buena Vista Social Club movie and album came out, the way Cuba was like the hot exotic spot, and the way that Cuban kind of hustlers played into that image that people had of them was just really fascinating, because it became clear that everybody's trying to get something out of everybody else. Like the foreigner comes and wants to have this like hot exotic experience, and the Cuban person is like, this is a way for me to get out and live dreams that I can't live here, or at least start getting money sent to me to fulfill other dreams, or at least basic needs. And so I started realizing that this was happening. And then at a certain point, I also realized that there was more to it than the quick judgments I was making, that there's actually, feelings do develop in these relationships, and things aren't as clear as they might seem. So that was kind of the initial spark. And then for Pablo, who's an Afro-Cuban guy, it was really important to him to show Afro-Cuban culture in a really, I guess, authentic is a weird word, but in a way that reflected his experience of growing up in Black Havana. And so we kind of put those two intentions together, and over the course of like way too many years, we scrabbled out a script that finally got some money, and then made a movie.
That's awesome. The central or essential concept in the film of that idea versus reality really kind of is front and center through most of it. So it's interesting that that was kind of your experience writing it as well. You have a basic idea, and then the more you dig, the more you discover more truth. That's interesting. There's a quote on your website, and I've heard you say it a couple times, that you aspire to make films that have the immediacy of music, and that you want to make music that has the evocative energy of films. And this is very much a film that is infused with all the other art forms that take place in it. It's not just a straightforward movie. How does this ethos inform your process when you're making a film, even over those course of many years and working with Pablo? How does that inform your process?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I just kind of do what I do, and I make things. It's like, I guess what I'm saying is, it's not like I set out to do a certain thing. It's more like that's how I think, and over the course of time, it's become clear to me that that's not necessarily how certain other people think, in terms of creating really, really sound-based films, or just integrating sound as a necessary part of the narrative isn't really everybody's thing, and that doesn't make anybody better or worse. Like I don't write super fast, and I don't write amazing dialogue on my first try, and some people can just like spit out amazing, they're masters of that, that side of the craft. Right. Whereas for me, it's more like, I guess what I'm really interested in is I was actually reading a Tarkovsky quote this morning, where he's talking about how film shouldn't be about objective logic, but about subjective logic. And I think that's really kind of what I'm going for. It's like, we can have this interview, and I can kind of make up something about the intentions that I had, but it wasn't really that. It was more a feeling I had in Cuba, and making films is a way of exploring those feelings for me. And so as important as the words that are on the page is the movement, the way people will look at each other, the sounds they're going to hear. And so then hopefully, you have to have enough bones in place, for like enough of a structure in place for people to follow a story and become involved with the storytelling aspects. But for me, as important as that is the dream that gets created, and like kind of, and hopefully you're not just living in your logical brain when you're consuming the film, because that's not how I like to, like, the films that I enjoy the most are rarely super straight ahead, like even
Right.
even like a movie like The Godfather or something, which has an incredible story, but it does really operate, that super slow zoom out at the beginning. It's like that's operating on a soul level, and that's the dream.
Yeah. And I said it was beautiful, and this is when I watched the film, the word that kept coming to mind was it's a poetic film, not necessarily in its lyricism, but the feelings that you get when you watch it. And you have the storyline, you have your very evocative use of color and camera angles, and then you have the music layered on top of that, and all of that together kind of works in a poetic way. And that was, I was wondering, like, in your mind when you're writing a scene, do you have preconceived notions of, like, maybe what sort of music you'd like behind that, or the color palette that scene is going to be? Or is it more, where it's optional? Obviously, when you're operating the cameras, you need to have an idea before you start shooting the scene. But when you look at it in the editing process and think, okay, this is the sort of music I'm going to put behind this or on top of it.
Yeah, well, definitely, like in like as early as the script, I have notes, or sometimes like written right into the script what music is going to be there, or what I assume is going to be, and then that always changes. And then there's the whole thing. Like, I often find that the best thing for me in films is that once there's a scene going, I've got the music that I think will work, and then I'll just try like the opposite. Like, if I think it should be a hip hop song, then I'll put some Arvo part, or try some metal or whatever, until it, and that kind of like shows you different sides of the scene. It's almost like you've got the scene in two dimensions, and then you're like shining these lights and getting these, like, oh, it could mean this, or it could have this. And by kind of throwing enough ideas at it, finally it like kind of, it's like, I feel like the music shouldn't tell you what to think. The music should, or it shouldn't even tell you what to feel. The music should provide an alternate narrative, and you should be like bouncing between those two things. And again, like something like The Godfather, which is I think one of the greatest soundtracks ever. If you listen to, like, it's like this weird diminished, and if you'd never seen The Godfather, you wouldn't assume that it's a movie about the Italian mafia.
Right.
You might think it's like a folk film, and it takes place in Italy or whatever. And that's why it works, because it's not like telling you what to think; it's telling you where to think or where to feel.
Right. That's so interesting. And my next question was also going to be about music, because you are a musician, and you did do the score for the film. And so, what was the process like actually constructing that score? And maybe you've touched on it a little bit already, but
Yeah. Well, it's definitely like I had ideas before, and in some cases those ideas worked, and then in some cases, like originally I was trying to license a bunch of Cuban hip hop and like reggaeton and reparto, which is kind of like the Afro-Cuban version of reggaeton. But because Cuba operates on a totally different like frequency in terms of like intellectual property and copyrights and stuff, it was impossible. And because people are sampling all sorts of stuff, you couldn't get sample clearances. And at a certain point, I was just like, I wonder if I can do this. And so I bought a drum machine and like learned how to do it, and it was super fun, And I worked with amazing Cuban musicians and amazing musicians in Montreal. But like the thing that was kind of the most exciting musical discovery of the whole film for me was while we were shooting, towards the beginning, Sara's grandmother is chopping onions, and she starts singing this song, No me preguntes por qué estoy triste. And so she's a quite a famous actress in Cuba, and we were really lucky to get her. And I'd heard that she could sing, and so when we were shooting that scene, like I had what I needed, and then I was just like, why don't you just sing whatever song comes to mind while you're doing this, do it the next time. And she came out with that song. And that song is about, um, don't ask me why I'm sad, because I'll never tell you. You don't, like, you're not here with me for the good time, for the bad times, only the good. And it somehow, like, it resonated super strongly. Like, it's not exactly the theme of the film, but it's like adjacent enough that it kind of like brings life to the film.
Right.
And it's also this beautiful melody, and it also came kind of naturally from the experience of shooting it. So then all the rest of the stuff that I scored that wasn't like, you know, a big beat was based on those melodies, you know. So there's all this kind of like granular synthesis, kind of ambient weirdo music at the end. And if you really listen to it carefully, you'll hear that it's exactly working on the chord progressions as that original song. So it's kind of like by being open during the shoot to what the film wanted, it
Mm-hmm.
kind of like opened this door that then is like, okay, now I have this, I have the thematic material to create whatever style of music I want and use these melodies and make a real film score. You know?
Wow, that's incredible. Maybe carrying on from that point, I understand that the principal actors in the film are not professional actors. And my question was going to be, was that your intention going in, or was that like a happy accident? But then what was that process like on set? Was there more of that, you know, improv, but like making discoveries on set through the performances and allowing that to inform things that went on in the filming of the rest of the film?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say the in the good scenes, like in the best scenes,
Yeah.
that's always happening. And it's like, you know, that's always a finding the the right tension between like knowing what you want to do and making it happen exactly like that, and knowing what the film wants you to do and being able to follow that, but without letting it go into chaos. Or like, you know, there's when the sun goes down and you got to stop shooting, you got to stop shooting. So you got to make sure you got your shots in. So you're, you know, you're balancing all these things. Um, yeah, I mean, I knew that I wanted a professional dancer. I was hoping I'd find one who was also an actor, and but it was a pretty specific kind of brief what I needed. You know, I needed a Afro-Cuban, uh, really high-level ballet dancer, and so there's lots of those in Cuba, but it's hard to get them out of Cuba.
Right.
So, so you know, there's like only like maybe a dozen really, that are, at least that I found. And Diona, the actor, is the nephew of Carlos Acosta, who's, you know, one of the most famous ballet dancers of all time.
Right.
And so he knew, and Carlos was kind of on some level of an inspiration for the film, because he grew up quite poor and then moved to London and became this like huge ballet star. And so anyway, there's this kind of like thing about that family that was interesting. And so I went to Munich and I interviewed, or I kind of did this like screen test with Yona at a Starbucks, and it was totally weird. And but I could tell that he really wanted it, you know. And so that was, and so that was him. And I knew also that, you know, he's a performer. He's been on stages since he was like whatever 6. So
Right.
I knew that he wouldn't be afraid of performance. But then to move from a performance in front of a, you know, in front of a stage, in front of a ton of people, to the intimacy of a camera right in your face and having to do things a million times was definitely like a challenge. And then
Right.
for the other two is really that I had it had to be specific. Like I needed an incredibly beautiful, like powerful woman to be Sarah.
Right.
And so Evelyn had some, you know, she'd been in like the Fast and Furious film that was in Havana. That was kind of it. So she didn't really have much experience, but she was also a professional dancer. And then Aki, again, I would have been happy to work with a, you know, seasoned actor, but she had to be Canadian and Iranian and the right age and the right vibe. And so they were the best people that I could find. And then in the end, why I think the acting works is because, well, partly because they are all super talented. And I'd say they all are professional actors at this point. You know, they got paid to make that movie, and they've all won awards at this point for the acting in
Yeah.
the film. So, but then it was also that I really changed the script, not like super significantly, but like I made a lot of the details fall more into who they really were, so that they didn't really have to do quite as much like acting. And what was really cool was that for everything that was in Spanish, I'd had to write the script in English in order to get money. And Yona's English is good, but whatever. In any case, they weren't going to be reading the English dialogue to each other. They're going to be reading in Spanish. So we had to translate it with them. So I'd explain what was happening in the scene, and then we'd work together in rehearsal to figure out how they would say it. And so then it was totally their own words. Like for the most part, Leonardo's words are Yona's words and Sara's words, and kind of for the whole thing. And there's and Aki too, like she has a certain accent. So when she would try to say things as if English was her first language, it would just come out kind of weird. So it worked way better to let them do it how they did it. And so it's kind of like the less the acting had to get in the way. And it's more like, what would you as a person do in the situation? The better the acting got. And then there's things like, in the original scripts, Leonardo was supposed to be this, like, I guess more of like a typical like Cuban hustler guy in a way, like really good salsa dancer, really suave. And Yona's like quite a sensitive guy, and he's a pretty bad salsa dancer. And so when we got on into the rehearsals and we started rehearsing those scenes, I was like, oh shit, this is not really going to work. Like he was very confident that he was going to get it in a day or two. He's like, I'm a professional, but it's like salsa is all about the hips, and ballet dancers tend to have really like locked hips because it's all about verticality. And so then we changed the script to make it that he was teaching salsa, because what else is he going to do? But he's not a very good salsa dancer, and that's way more interesting, than like this typical alpha Cuban male dude. And so it was like by working with who people really were that I think we were able to get these really interesting performances.
That's great. And I like the idea of him teaching a salsa class, but he's not particularly good, playing into that idea of ideas versus reality as well. So Leonardo, the main character, is a ballet dancer, and ballet isn't an art form that's usually fronted in films. Why did you settle on ballet as where you wanted to focus?
Well, like I said, the script went through like multiple iterations. At one point, he was a musician. At one point, he was a poet who was having trouble or a journalist because he was having trouble with the government, and a bunch of reasons why someone would want to leave. I thought it would be interesting to show an artist in any case, but music is a little bit played out. Everybody knows that Cuban music is awesome, and writers are hard. It's like not a very cinematic thing, and people know that people outside of Cuba don't necessarily know that the level of ballet in Cuba, because it's really, it's like a factory of incredible ballet dancers. And the reasons are partly that, it was under Soviet influence for so long. And so all these Russian ballet teachers would go. And so the Cuban ballet school is at a really high technical level. And then also the way Caribbean bodies move is just different. The way bodies are built is different. And so there's like, you've got this kind of Russian elegance and precision, and then you've got this more Caribbean power. And like, so people can like tend to jump higher and have a different kind of stamina and spin faster. And they're like, so there's this like physicality that Cubans bring to ballet that's really exciting and is really kind of different from the classic European approach. And I didn't know that until I went to Cuba and spent time there. And I thought that would be interesting for people to know. And, also dance is just it can be very cinematic. And so a lot of it was also trying to figure out how to film ballet in a way that was going to get the visceral and physical quality across and not make it seem like floofy. You know what I mean?
Right. Sometimes there can be that element of film when filming dance where the camera is static and they're trying to let the dance that's happening on screen do all the movement. I think what I love about this film is that you feel like the camera is part of the dance as much as anything else.
Yeah, I shot all the 16 millimeter stuff, and then Juan Pablo Ramirez, who's a Mexican cinematographer who's amazing, he shot all the digital stuff, and we were definitely dancing. We weren't as elegant as Yona, but we were moving around like crazy, and the focus pullers were like freaking out because we were trying to be really intuitive with what they were doing. And yeah, and it really became this kind of, it becomes a very like, I mean, not like, I guess sensual would be the word, not erotic so much, but there's this like there's a sensual space between the camera and the dancer. And when the dancer is like kind of playing for the camera too much, it gets super cheesy. But if there's this like a kind of a coyness, but also an openness through movement to what the camera's doing, there can be this really like electric charge, and then you get these like magical moments, and you lose all of that if you just film it in a wide shot. And it's always like, I work with a lot of dancers and street dancers and stuff, and often at first people, they want to just be in a wide shot because they want people to see how high they're jumping and what they're doing with their legs and stuff. And it's like, yeah, but sometimes what you're doing with your legs is actually more interesting in your face right now. And it takes a while to get that across. But then once you do it and you show people how amazing they look dancing when you're not just doing this wide shot, then people get excited about it.
Right.
Often what's happening with a person's body off screen is like as important as what's on screen. So often I'll tell someone, like, if it's supposed to be tense, like, squeeze your fist in your pocket or whatever. You're not seeing that, but it's like it's affecting the entire body.
Right. That's incredible. We show as many documentaries in our festival as we do feature films, and you're an accomplished documentarian. And I wanted to ask how you approach finding a story that's in reality for a documentary versus how you find a story when you're creating it out of whole cloth in a fictional script.
That's a good question, man. I mean, I guess it's always just what is exciting and what you're curious about. So, or what you're getting paid to do, which is also happening sometimes. But I actually just like 3 days ago finished a documentary that I shot in Haiti.
Oh, nice.
Which is a very like dance, music, hybrid poetry documentary. It's not like, yeah, it's kind of a weird alien, but I think it's awesome. But I was just so excited about the way like Haitians use a ritual since its independence until now, that I wanted to film rituals as it is expressed through like these like daredevil rollerbladers in Port-au-Prince or in old voodoo ceremonies. And so it's this kind of like portrait of the way ritual works in Haiti. And I mean, I was living down there, so that was just something that I got excited about. And then with this, I guess it could have been a documentary, but I had more, I guess I was, that theme was interesting to me, and it felt like the best way to explore that theme cinematically was to like exercise a bit more control over it than to just follow someone who's trying to get out of Cuba, and then maybe they do, maybe they don't, and they get to wherever and it's weird. Like, we've seen that movie, and this one I wanted to get into something that would, I guess, just hit different levels that wouldn't have been maybe possible in the documentary.
Right. One of my cinematic cliches that I really love is the difference between truth and reality. And I kind of like that idea of, you wanted to hit on the truth of the story, so you told it in a fictional way, whereas if you want to show the reality of something, then there's a different art form for that.
Yeah. So. I don't know how much reality there is in documentary, though. It's a whole other mess. But.
Right. I've got one last question for you here. Your band, Bella Orchestra, released an album during the pandemic, and this film was released during the pandemic. I wonder if you can speak to how the pandemic has impacted you as an artist, not just obviously in the logistical, but like maybe in your mindset, and how the release of both of these things, which are big creations that I imagine took many years in the film, obviously, being released in them, and how that, what you've learned that you might take forward now that hopefully things are on the improve.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it sucked. It was that film was like 15 years in the making. The album was like 8 years in the making.
Mhm.
So to do all of that and then not be able to tour the record, not be able to show the film in screen first feature, it's just like
Yeah.
it was pretty devastating for a while. And also like, festivals were either accepting 25% of what they normally accept. And so it was getting rejected more than I had expected. And it just took a while for it to find its footing.
Mm.
And so I had to really look at what's like, why do we do this? Like, are we doing it to like win statues, or are we doing it because that's the best way to live life, and like, so, and then luckily the film ended up finding some success, and I'm actually really pleased with how things went in the end, but it took like a long time to get to that. And
Mm.
so I had to really go into this, like, get pretty depressed about the whole situation, and then really face like, why do we do this thing? There's this, I guess we all have what, like, no matter what your career is, it's easy to think that, okay, when I get to X level, then things will be okay.
Right.
And the kind of this experience made me realize that that's like, we all know, like, in our, like, theoretically that's not true, but there's still this thing like, oh, maybe if I just get X thing, then life will get better. That's not how it works. It's all that matters for me is to be able to be like, have a relatively comfortable, nice life and be able to create. So if this film does well enough to allow me to make another one, that's great. It's really not about getting pieces of paper or money or statues. That stuff is nice. And I mean, you need a little bit of that because you need to feel like people are connecting with the insane amount of years of work.
Right.
But really, it's like, the job is to create. And if you can be in a place where you enjoy creation, then that's the win. And there's, I could win an Oscar next year or never win another award. And I'd love for that to not matter to me. I'm not there yet, but I'd like to be really, yeah, just somebody actually told me a really interesting, this like pretty famous photographer. He's like, when you're done the photo and it gets printed, that's the trophy. Like, great, you got a trophy. What you're in it for isn't the trophy. If you're just out there to, like, he was like, I don't want to, just print the photos and not do the thing. What's in that got me to make the photo. Then at the end, you get a trophy for making the photo, but it's the whole story of your life of being in a phase of creation or whatever it is that you get excited about. And so I feel like I have a better relationship with it. And it's an insane business that is really gross in a lot of ways, but it also allows you to, like, my job is to create dreams for people to exist in for 90 minutes. And so that's amazing. And if there's gross parts of it, well, I have to just learn how to deal with it.
Right. From the festival side of things, we felt the exact same way. We had to cancel our 2020 festival. 2021 had to be online. This year we get to have some in-person stuff. Hopefully next year we'll get it back. And it's that, we want to bring to our communities like amazing pieces of art. And doing it virtually is great, but you lack that connection, like you say, like that connection with the audience and seeing how they experience something that is beautiful and has taken a lot of people a long time, and they've poured their hearts and souls into it. So we're glad to be getting back to that. And I want to thank you again for just an amazing piece of art that we're happy to share with our audience, and hopefully it speaks and touches them.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you so much for the good questions. And it's been a while since I talked about it. It's nice to remember it. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, have a great day, and our audience will enjoy the film, and we'll look out for this new documentary about Haiti too. So
yeah, right on, man. All right.
All right.
Take care.